then that orange button.
Okay. So we're ready?
We're all good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad that you've all been willing to come out and listen to these classes. Today we're going to start by talking about choosing wisely. But before we begin, I want to give you a little bit about our background. Mary and I lived in Urbana for 3.5 years, from 1962 to 1965, and we lived on this house. Actually, we had the basement apartment in 407 West Green Street. As you can see, there wasn't a lot of light in there. I mean, there was one or two windows, and but it was very convenient. It was within walking distance of the university, and by 1964, this mall where we're all meeting now was only 4 blocks away. So we have, I guess, fond memories of Urbana. We're over here right now, and that's where it was. I guess if this had existed, this Beck had existed then, I probably would have stayed here, at least for my first job. I did my PhD in the material science department a few blocks away. It was then called Mining, Metallurgy, and Petroleum Engineering. And Mary worked at what was then Julia F. Burning School of Nursing, where our son Andrew was born in 1964. So he's a product of manufactured right here in Urbana, Illinois. So today we're going to talk about the first subject of 5 through the week, choosing wisely. And then we're going to follow up with the realistic expectations in marriage, followed by making love last. You can choose wisely, you can have realistic expectations, but that can change 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. And then we'll deal with some of the obstacles that make difficulties in marriages. And finally, the last class on Friday is going to be becoming simpatico. Now, this is an Italian word that it's hard to translate actually into English. It implies a oneness of mind, body, and spirit of one or more people together. Okay, so let's focus in on the topic choosing wisely. So the very first thing you got to do before you get married is find a partner. And the process of doing that, one has to make some hard choices. How do you decide what's the right person for you? And the idea of choosing wisely is not analytical in terms, you can't put in terms of physics or mathematics. There's a verse in the Old Testament that King Solomon wrote, Proverbs 30. He says, there be 3 things which are too wonderful for me, yea, 4 which I know not. The way of an eagle in the air, the way of a serpent upon a rock, the way of a ship in the midst of the sea, and the way of a man with a maid. Now, I dare say we do understand now how eagles fly. We have some idea about locomotion of serpents, and I think we've got a pretty good control of the sea compared to Solomon's era, but we still haven't figured out what makes 2 people of opposite sex be attracted to each other. It can't be really sat down and quantified into some magical formula which tells you, here's the person, here's the one that's going to be perfect for me. Okay, did this woman choose wisely? Let's take a look at some sort of outstanding cases that have made the media. This is Tom Brady drives Terrell Suggs crazy. This was the headline in USA Today, and it's Terrell Suggs was a great defensive player for the Baltimore Ravens, and I think most people know that Tom Brady is a decent product of the University of Michigan, who made out semi-good with the Boston Patriots.
Got lucky.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. On top of that, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, that's Terrell Suggs at the time, had a cache of guns removed from his home by police after his longtime girlfriend, Candace Williams, filed a protection order against him in November. She allegedly, in September, that he punched her in the neck and dragged her beside his car. The order was dropped in December, and she and Suggs married days later. Now, here's a classic case of two people who are attracted to each other, and in the process of this attraction, things happened that may have or should have made her a little suspicious that this was going to be a good relationship. So that was in 2013. Along the way, before 2013, Suggs had been put up for domestic abuse. He had been filed charges again in 2012, and again in 2012 he was ordered to surrender his weapons, including an AK-47, pretty powerful weapon. So this is a man with obvious, what they call anger issues. So here's the latest, which I just found out a few days before coming here, February 13, 2015. I mean, about a year before coming, almost exactly a year before, but 3 years after the events you saw in the previous slide. Terrell Suggs' wife of 2 years has filed for divorce, accusing the Ravens outside linebacker of adultery, an accusation he denies. Kendi Suggs requests full custody of the couple's two children, who are ages 6 and 7. So obviously they were together before they ever got married. And it's a curious case that statistics show that people who live together prior to marriage actually have a higher rate of divorce than people who don't actually cohabitate until they are married. And perhaps that's due to the fact that people who live together for quite a while and can't make up their mind about marriage already have commitment issues. So how do we actually make a good choice? She didn't make a good choice. And there were a lot of warning signs that she should have probably picked up. Here is a whole bunch of ways that people match up in the world today. eHarmony.com, Match, Christian Mingle, Senior People Meet, Chemistry.com, sounds like a strange site, J-Dates, which is for Jewish people. These are all based on the presumption that people who are alike will be most comfortable with other people who are alike. So you take a personality test, and there's a whole bunch of questions that try to match up your personalities. The fact of the matter is that sometimes people who are too much alike actually clash. And there's plenty of stories in history of people who actually complement each other and not have exactly Xerox copies of each other's personalities. But this is the presumption. So what do women look for in a man? First, honesty. That's at the top of the list. These are ranked in order. Then respect, security, sense of humor. That gets you through a lot of problems. Intelligence, nobody likes to believe they're marrying someone that's stupid. Responsibility, someone they can count on. Maturity, someone who is able to handle situations without breaking down. And then, of course, good manners, hygiene, and nice appearance. Finally, they expect their spouse to be loyal to them. Chivalry is another thing. You know, do you hold the door for her? Do you help her with your coat? Are you the type of person who looks out for her and she's kind of special for you? And finally, that they share the same spiritual goals. That's very, very important. I put in capitals because this comes up in every issue. So what do men look for in a woman? First on the rank is kindness, and then emotional strength. Men don't like women who break down and cry at the slightest drop of any issue. And they like to believe that their wives are kind people who will look out for them. Honesty, again, comes up on both lists. And finally, intelligence is there, and about the same rank. to be matched with someone who is not quite on the same wavelength you and with respect to the emotional and intelligent level that you have, it leads to clashes. A good sense of humor. I love it that my wife will laugh at my jokes even when I know they're pathetic, but it gives us a chance to share thoughts without being too serious about life. And then this one I always love, sexy without being trampy. That's kind of important. No one likes to think that their wife is a streetwalker. And the wife is your best friend, someone you can confide in, someone that when you have a problem, she'll understand. Caring, a person that would make a good mother, that is the kind of person that cares about you. Respectful, and finally, shares the same spiritual goal, appears on both lists. So, if you look at these two lists, how does that rank in your perception of the partner you're either engaged to or married to? Which of these things are the most important? When I gave you these lists, they were ranked in order of importance from a large number of people. But some people might value a sense of humor higher than some of these other issues. Okay, so things to look for in choosing a potential mate. First, are his or her parents married and are they happy? A lot of people come from broken homes, and that often is an obstacle. If your potential mate has come from a happy family, chances are they're going to be happy in a marriage because their expectations are for happiness. People who come from a happy, stable families generally have much better chance of a happy, stable marriage. Now, none of these are absolutes. Obviously, someone coming from a broken home can have learned lessons from that and not repeat it. But they may need some help to overcome it. What is his or her childhood like? Someone who's had a happy childhood has expectations of happiness. Someone who's had a miserable childhood often repeats the same mistakes in adulthood. This is very serious. Has he or she ever been physically or emotionally abused? This is something where somebody might need actual help to overcome that, professional counseling to overcome it. And does he or she have a healthy sense of themselves deserving the best for themselves? In other words, you don't want to be hooked up to a person who's always down in the dumps. Everything is a tragedy. Every problem is a problem. I can't get over this. Oh, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with that. A person who has a healthy sense of themselves says, well, I can do it. And what is her relationship with her father? It's been proven over and over again that women who have a good relationship with a male figure, usually their father, could even be their stepfather, have a healthy relationship with men in general. And similarly, a man who has a good relationship with his mother, or a mother figure, could be his grandmother, is going to have a happy relationship with his wife. Moving on, this idea of what is his or her self-image. If your self-image is yourself is that you're not a worthy person, nothing is ever going to go right for me, what do I call this? The woe is me syndrome. This is something that puts a real obstacle in the way of a happy marriage. Emotionally healthy person is a positive person who looks at problems as challenges that need to be solved rather than obstacles that cannot be handled. That's a very important concept because life doesn't always work out the way we expect it to work out. Things come along that we cannot predict. Problems raise themselves that we could not have foreseen. And if we are the type of person who looks at that as an obstacle that's going to mess us up rather than, okay, how do I deal with it? We're going to be in trouble. Is he or she an honest person? This is an important principle because if you're married to someone who's dishonest, who's cheating on you, who's always trying to finagle something, you're going to be in trouble. Nothing will kill a marriage faster than lack of trust between the partners. Is he or she reliable? If you have to count on another person, that person you got to count on is your spouse. You need to believe that they will carry out something they promise to do. And nothing fouls up a marriage more than you think something is going to happen and you trust the person to carry it out, and then it never happens. And by the way, this happens in all relationships. Not really a good employee either to have someone who is unreliable. You cannot depend on your marriage partner. Who can you depend on? And finally, what are his or her past relationships been like? This is an important issue because if you've had a bad past, it's unlikely you're going to create a good future. Okay, so let's move on a little bit about it. This idea of picking out someone who really is you're going to be comfortable with is the expectations in America can be very unrealistic. We're in a situation where on television and the media and magazines, everywhere, the ideal person is very far from the reality of the average person. The average person, female, is about 5'4" and weighs 160 pounds. The average American male is 5'9" and weighs about 191 pounds. I weigh about 190 pounds, I weigh about 185, but I'm far from 5 feet 9.5 inches. I'm more like 5'6", 5'5.5" maybe. And Mary, my wife, is about 5'1", but fortunately she doesn't weigh 160 pounds. She weighs more like about 115 and has always weighed that. She has a very unusual genetic makeup in that she could have 3 children and be 57 years later and weighs actually, I think, 2 pounds less than when I married her. But not everybody is that fortunate. See, I know how to pick. It is said that every man marries a woman he hopes will never change in terms of beauty, and a woman marries a man she hopes she can change in terms of character, and both are invariably disappointed. And this data comes from the Center for Disease Control, so it's not something that was made up. It was surveyed and found out. So what are the fairy tales versus reality? We're not all going to marry movie stars. And to be frank with you, most movie stars have pretty miserable marriages anyway because their expectations are even more unrealistic. But in fairy tale, this is the movie star. I believe this is Helene Joy, who's a Canadian actress who was obviously one of my favorites, or I would have picked this out. And this is the girlfriend. A little bit heavier, a little bit more Zoftic. I cut off the face so you don't really need to see the actual person. Same is true for men. I mean, here's Denzel Washington, again, one of my favorites, a very good-looking guy. He actually was picked one year by some magazine as the sexiest guy in Hollywood. And this is Kevin James, the boyfriend. And I should repeat that his real name is Kevin Niffing, and he used to be our next-door neighbor. He grew up actually right next door to us when we lived in Stony Brook. We graduated the same high school, same class with my oldest boy at Stony Brook in Ward Millville High School. But he's done all right for himself, but a little heavy. And that's Mary and I. Picture taken on a cruise about it's our 55th anniversary. And we were dancing that night to the Platters, Twilight Time, one of my all-time favorite groups. And it's kind of nice to think that we did this on our first date on October 26, 1957. And we could still be dancing to this 55 years later. A little bit slower on the dancing. The knees hurt a little bit more. But Twilight Time. So important qualities to look for in a mate are spiritual. What are those spiritual qualities? Well, here's where we get very good guidance from the scriptures. There's no question about it that the Bible is not only a book to tell us about the future and eternal things, but it is an outstanding guidebook for helping us live a good life today. So the first thing is, here is some principles that are laid down. Lord Jesus Christ says, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Now, that's a good model for how you can approach a marriage. If you love your partner completely, with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind, you are emulating the way we should love God. But in doing that with your partner, you're demonstrating it in reality right here and now. And if we can't do that with our partner, then saying we do it with God is probably completely hypocritical. And dedication, he says, blessed is the man or woman who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. So there's this sense of dedication that we need to God. It's not something we do once a year, or only on holidays, which is the habit of some people who believe that they're Christians. A lot of people don't even do that nowadays. But he's saying it's something you got to do day and night. And that's the same sense of dedication you need to have in a marriage. It's not something you can turn on or off or practice once a month or whatever. It's something that you have to work on every day. And finally, he says, but this is the one to whom I will look, he who is humble, contrite in spirit, and trembles at my word. So this humble spirit, humility means teachable. So in a relationship, we need to be willing to teach each other, to grow, and not have the kind of spirit that says, well, this is the way it is, and this is the way it's always been, that's the way I want it. So it is a commandment, not just a suggestion, to marry only in the Lord. We will find ourselves far happy spiritually if our partner is also a person who is spiritual. It ends up in a lot of conflicts in marriage, end up because the two partners are not on the same spiritual level. So how does he put this? The Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, says, be not unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? So this idea of marrying outside the faith creates a barrier. And he says it's like the difference between light and darkness. That's a very sharp contrast. There's nothing gray here. And he tells in another place, it's the same church, just a chapter later, he says, only in the Lord, to marry only in the Lord. He didn't have to belabor the point because the Old Testament says it over and over again that to marry outside the household of faith was an offense against God. And these commandments are not done to punish us. They're actually done to make life easier for us. Because if both partners have the same spiritual dedication, they're going to be a much better spirit in the marriage. And they're going to be helping each other and lifting each other up. And then again, 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 to 4, the commandment is repeated. And it is made for us to walk towards God's kingdom in that path easier. Well, how do you find your soulmate? That's a popular expression today, soulmate. Well, what does it mean? It means two people who are totally in sync with each other. The law of averages is in your favor the more times you try something. So the better will be your chances for success if you go to make your choice in places that are right, places where you're likely to find a person who is also spiritually dedicated. It's unlikely to happen if you don't give it a try. And where are these right places? I'm not a big favorite of websites, but some of them might be worthwhile. In general, meeting someone in person far better than trying to fill out a form. So in your church, Christian gatherings, at Bible schools, in CYC, which are youth activities, in preaching work, and in these days, there are Christian internet sites, there are Facebook, Christian chat rooms. There are lots of ways in which you can meet people who actually have some sense of dedication. A person dedicated to God is going to be a person with a higher degree of responsibility to their fellow human beings. That's That's just obvious. But this doesn't suit you. What should you do if you meet someone that you fancy but who is not a believer? Well, that's always a challenge. Since half the people in this country don't go to church, your odds are 2 to 1 you might actually meet someone who you like in other ways but doesn't have the same spiritual values. This is taken from a book called A New Life, based on this verse in Amos 3:3. If they love you, they should be love what you believe. Amos says that can two walk together, at least they be agreed. So unless you agree to walk together, the chances are you're never going to meet. And you're never going to meet on the same path. And so this advice taken from this book, The New Life by John Marshall, he says, the best advice I have seen for this situation, the situation of meeting someone who is not a believer but that you like, is that the introduction of one's spiritual interest in the faith should be made at the start of a friendship, and its overwhelming importance for you should be emphasized. The danger of friendships outside the faith is that one's hope of the kingdom may not be revealed until one is emotionally and deeply involved. By then, it may be too late to be convincing to the friend, and even more sadly, we may find ourselves too weak spiritually to follow the right course. So don't wear your faith and hide it in the closet. When I was dating my wife, on the very first date, I brought it up. And I don't know what she thought of me, but she went back, I think, to the nurse's residence on Welfare Island, and she talked to some of the other nurses that I had dated and told them about this guy. And they said, "Oh, well, he's a nice guy, but he's a little too much into religion." Fortunately for Mary and me, that made Mary more curious. For others who were not so interested, that was the main reason I didn't date him a second or third time. If you get involved and 6 months later you say, "Oh, by the way, I am dedicated to good Christian values in my church, and I'd like you to be interested," it's like, wow, we've been going together 6 months and you never said a word to me. I don't believe it's that important. And that's what he's saying here. The importance has to be made and emphasized from the beginning. Not with a sledgehammer or a 2x4. Don't hit him over the head with it, but make it clear that this is something that's important to you. Okay, so that kind of ends tonight's talk, and we will be following up through the week and building on these ideas. Once you choose wisely, that doesn't guarantee success in a marriage forever. There are lots of things along the way that will come up that we need to be dealt with and that we're going to be talking about through this week. So thank you very much for your attention and appreciate it.